And now, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, a special hello goes out to the Director of Media for the Boston Bruins Alumni, Mr. Mark Bourque. Nice to see you, Marky.
Welcome to the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast, the home of behind-the-scenes interviews, stories, and memories that celebrate the heritage of the great game of hockey. The Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast is hosted by Mark Willand.
Welcome to episode 17 of the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast, classic hockey stories from classic hockey players. By the way, can you identify that lead-in music? If so, consider yourself to be a true Bruins fan. For those who don't know, that song is Paris, which the legendary John Kiley played as the Bruins took the ice in the glory days. I think the Bruins need to get that song back in the game night rotation. Before we start the show, we want to thank you for the great feedback you've been giving us in iTunes, Facebook, and via email. It is greatly appreciated. The PHA podcast is available everywhere: iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, YouTube, and anywhere you can find podcasts. Please take a moment to subscribe to the show and provide a rating or review. It helps others find the show more easily, and it provides me with a much-needed hit of dopamine. This week's guest needs no introduction, but he's going to get one anyway. What an honor to talk with this week's guest, my good friend and Boston Bruins legend, Rick Nifty Middleton. First-round draft pick of the New York Rangers in 1973, Nifty scored 448 career goals and 988 career points in 14 sensational NHL seasons with the Rangers and the Bruins. He topped 40 goals and 90 points for 5 consecutive seasons in the 1980s, played in 3 NHL All-Star games and 2 Canada Cups. Now, while his stick handling and offensive flair were legendary, he also was a great two-way player and is the Bruins' all-time leader in shorthanded goals. Nifty is now the president of the Boston Bruins Alumni Association, which raises hundreds of thousands of dollars for those in need throughout the New England area and across North America. Nifty is one of the hockey's great ambassadors and is certainly worthy of having his number 16 hanging from the rafters of the Boston Garden. Prior to the interview, we want to tell you about an opportunity for fans to deliver their memories of Rick Middleton and the Boston Bruins right to Nifty himself. Nifty's audiobook library allows you to record, share, or even add a picture or two to your story of Rick and the classic Bruins of the 70s and 80s. Rick will add your story to his audiobook library and share it for all Bruins fans to enjoy. Rick talks about this opportunity during the interview, but to learn more, visit bostonbruinsalumni.com or audiolibrary.net. And now, here's Rick Nifty Middleton. We're back with our good friend, Rick Nifty Middleton. Rick, thanks for being with us here today.
Great, Mark. Thanks for having me.
We wanted to do this for a while. I'm glad we finally have the opportunity. It's a big month. I call it Nifty November here in 2018, as at the end of the month, of course, you'll be honored with having your number raised to the rafters. We'll talk about that, but it's going to be quite a month for you, and I'm sure you'll be doing this will be one out of about 500 interviews you'll be doing, so thanks for squeezing us in. I wanted to go back, growing up in the Toronto area, Nifty. That was a time when the Toronto Maple Leafs were a real force in the NHL, probably the last time that they consistently were a big force. George Armstrong, the Big M, Tim Horton.
I know them all, yeah. Horton and Stanley, Bond and Brewer, Johnny Bauer and net, the Big M, Davey Keon, all my boyhood idols.
Now you sound like John Horgan being able to rattle those names off. But
he knows everybody. I only know the old Leafs from the 60s. And I used to have every one of their hockey cards. And when the memorabilia got to be a business, I called my mother and I said, "Hey, Mom, you still got those cards put away that I used to collect as a kid?" And she, "Oh no, I threw those out a long time ago." I'm like, "Oh no." All the Stanley Cup teams, you know.
Right. I think we all have that same story, but we had fun with those cards.
Oh yeah.
But I'm assuming the Leafs were your team back then. Did you get a chance to see them at all in the Garden in person?
Well, my father started his own one-man printing business back in the day, and we didn't have a lot of money. I don't know many people that had much money back in the '60s, but he had clients, that he did printing for, that every once in a while would throw him tickets, but they were always grays. And in Maple Leaf Gardens, the grays were like the back of the balcony in the old Boston Garden, but even farther away. But I didn't care. I was a young boy going to see the Leafs play at Maple Leaf Gardens, and I didn't care if I had to stand up the whole time. And I have a couple of very vague memories, but I certainly remember it. And I think I get a lot of people coming up to me remembering when their dad took them to games and such, and the era that they grew up in, and I did the same thing.
Absolutely. It must have been, I don't know if you remember, I had the experience when I first went to the Boston Garden in the early 70s. It was an amazing life experience. I'll never forget walking up the concourse and seeing that ice for the first time. Usually I used to see it on Channel 38, and so you'd have not the same thing back then. It wasn't high definition TV, and I was just stunned to see.
Not by far. Most of the time it had snow on it.
Right. So it must have been great to again, just to be able to see those Leaf teams. It was a great, as you said, you probably knew all the players. There's only 120 of them in the league, so.
Well, exactly. So it wasn't hard to know all the players on the other team. So I even invented because I used to have allergies as a kid, and I'd be good for 2 weeks in bed with bronchitis every year, and so I through my imagination made up a dice game where I would have games and standings and goals for and leading score and the whole bit.
That's really interesting.
I memorized almost every player on the other teams also. So
it's funny you say that.
I got to meet a lot of them. As I turned pro.
That's great. That's a bit of statistical information I was unaware of, and entrepreneurial as well. That's very creative. So I often have those discussions. Right? When I refer to John Horgan, just to the fans, John is the almost has basically his mind is a computer that never gets turned off. He's just incredible.
Yeah, now game announcer doesn't fit John.
No. And so he's a big part of the Bruins alumni. He's the announcer, but he's also a hockey historian. So when I refer to him, and when Nifty just told the story about creating a dice game, it reminds me that both John and I did the same thing when we were kids as well. So we're in good company. As you've talked before, we've been at hockey camps together. You've talked to kids a little bit about something that was very prominent in your area when you grew up, which was street hockey, and how that helped develop your hand-eye coordination and your overall feel for the puck when you get on the ice. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, yeah, except in Canada they call it road hockey, but down here they call it street hockey. But, growing up, again, there's 3 channels on TV. There wasn't a whole lot to do outside of play hockey, and when I wasn't on the ice, I was out on the street. We had a street light right out in front of our house at 80 Gilroy, and it was an expanding suburb of Toronto at the time, and our street was fairly long, so it had a lot of houses on it, but it was a side street, and it seemed all the kids were about the same age, so we had no lack I had no lack of ability to get all the kids we needed for a game. Sometimes I had to turn them away at times.
Right.
But it just seemed like there was always enough to have a game. We put the nets out on the ice, out on the street. And then if the plows came by on Saturdays and plowed and the banks were high enough, we'd allow checking.
That sounds very familiar to a lot of fans who are listening who grew up in Boston in the 1970s. Street hockey was king. Yeah. And that's how I played most of my hockey. I didn't quite develop the hand-eye coordination as Rick Middleton, but nonetheless, it was fun. You eventually find yourself, you go from junior B in Toronto, you end up with the famed Oshawa Generals, a junior hockey program that spawned Bobby Orr and Terry O'Reilly, among others. Had to be a big...
and Wayne Cashman.
Wayne Cashman, too, right. So it had to be a big accomplishment. You're just a kid. You had to grow up in a hurry, and you're at Oshawa General. Talk a little bit about that, especially your first year, just that first year of junior hockey.
Well, when they retire my jersey, I'm going to have my old coach, one of my old coaches. I only have two growing up, really, and this gentleman had me from the age of 13 to 16. If it wasn't for him, his name's Frank Miller, I would never have made it to Oshawa, let alone to the NHL. I was a weak skater. I wasn't an ankle bender, but not pretty close to it. I kind of had a knack to put the puck in the net, but I wasn't a strong skater at all. He changed my skating around in 3 years so that when I was 16 in 1969, I got drafted by the Oshawa Generals. I had 6 full scholarship offers. One of them was the BU, but I decided to play junior hockey. But the first year, I still wasn't big enough or strong enough, I felt, because the junior A hockey in those days, and I think it still is, it's on TV. So I was watching the Toronto Marlboros play on Sunday afternoons, and they were, like, to me as a kid, one level below the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Right.
I was like, I don't think I'm ready for that yet. So I played a year of B, like you said, in Toronto for the Toronto Young Nationals, who I played with under Frank Miller. The first year they had a B team in Toronto. And it really prepared me to go to Junior A. So when I made it to Oshawa, which was really only a half hour from my house in Toronto, so I lived at home. I didn't have to leave home like most guys do. Mm-hmm. And I only played 2 years at junior, which, compared to a guy like Dennis Potvin, who played 5 years at Junior A, I only played 2. And luckily, my best year was my last year, which was my draft year. And I ended up scoring the most goals in the league that year. Thanks to my line mates and teammates, and went on to get drafted in the first round. So things just kind of fell into place, but it wasn't, wasn't the road that a lot of people think that it was paved right to the NHL. No.
Oh, absolutely.
Not initially.
Right. Do you remember in Ottawa, goaltender Gilles Gerton?
Sure. Yeah, in Oshawa. I played with him my first year.
So he ended up getting the name Loonie for his eccentric habits.
He played in New York too.
Right.
For the Rangers. Yeah.
Was he a little different as a teenager, or did?
Yeah. Apparently he used to do a little transcendental meditation, and on game days go to Spain or somewhere. I read, but no, I didn't know him all that well. But he was, they always laugh at French goalies, so.
Right.
He was. Maybe that's one of the reasons that they think they're a little different or stranger than most people.
Absolutely. Hey, when you were drafted by the New York Rangers, during those days, there was a bidding war or a battle for players between the new World Hockey Association and the NHL. You're also drafted by the Minnesota Fighting Saints, I believe, of the WHA. Did they contact you? Did they make an effort to sign you prior to your signing with New York?
No, not really. I think for 2 reasons. One, I went first round to the Rangers, the NHL, second round to the WHA. If it was the other way around, there might have been a little more yearning to sign me, for lack of a better word. But
right.
And secondly, I had Alan Eagleson as an agent. Shame on me, but I thought that having the head of your union and one of the top agents in the game at the time, who had Bobby Orr as his first client, I said, I went after him, and he took me on, and I think he would lean more towards me signing an NHL contract than a WHA.
Right.
So that might have led to it also, but I don't remember getting a lot of calls or interest from Minnesota, which was just fine with me. I mean, the other way around, I could have used maybe a little more bartering, but I got a pretty good contract. Looking back and hearing what some other guys made in our sport and other sports, I had a pretty good contract, and it was a one-way. So even when the Rangers sent me down to Providence for that first year, I still got paid the same money. So it was pretty good.
All right. So you get drafted. You come into camp, and this is not the California Golden Seals or an expansion team. This is the storied franchise with a number of future Hall of Famers like Rod Gilbert, Jean Bertel, Brad Park, Ed Jacquemin. And what's that like going to camp? You're a young kid, a lot of seasoned veterans, a very, very good team. The Cat Francis running the show. What was that training camp like and that entire experience for you?
I wish I could remember like specific things, but I just remember being awful nervous. And the camp was in Kitchener, Ontario, which Kitchener has a junior A team we played against for 2 years. So, I knew who the Kitchener Rangers were, the New York Rangers, but going to training camp, and like I said, meeting some of my boyhood idols, Eddie Jacquemin and Rod Gilbert and Jean Bertel. They weren't ancient, but to me, they were a lot older. And, but all I remember is that they were first class. They didn't treat me like, hey, this kid's trying to take my job type of deal. They welcomed me with open arms. First class. Emile Francis was first class. And even though I got sent to the minors, I understood it. The Rangers played the Bruins the year before for the Cup. So they had a Stanley Cup caliber team at that time. So I was like, yeah, sure, I'll go to Providence, wherever that is, Providence, Rhode Island. It was funny. I went down there yesterday with Joe McDonald from the Providence Journal and kind of went back in time, and we went down to Cranston where I used to live down there just to kind of jog my memories. Mm-hmm. So it was kind of like a walk in the past, and I really enjoyed it. So, but I still have friends from that year, and still have some really fond memories of my Providence days.
You played for a real good coach too, Johnny Muckler, that first year, and a lot of seasoned veterans on that team, and guys like John Bednarski and Larry Sacher, guys who later played for the Rangers. You won the Rookie of the Year, so you've just kind of had your memories relived yesterday down in Cranston and Providence. But what stands out about that first pro season for you?
Well, that was my first time away from home, as I didn't have to move out in junior. So, it was exciting. I was getting paid some pretty good money, so I didn't have to worry about money. There was like 10 single guys living in an apartment building. I had a roommate, Andre Palaffi, who was another member of the team, older than me. And as a matter of fact, I went to the Reds reunion this summer just because Andre was going to be there. I hadn't seen him in 45 years.
Wow.
He married a Providence girl, so he looked just the same. He looked great. So it's great now to really go back and reminisce and meet people and guys that you played with, maybe even just for a short time. My memories of that year are, fairly clear. So, a couple of road trips we had. And the one game I remember the most is really in the finals. We went to the Calder Cup finals that year, and we were down 3-0 with the fourth game in Providence, and we went into overtime. I scored in overtime to win, and I turn around. I swear this is my memory of it. There was about 3 guys on the ice to congratulate me. I'm like, well, where did everybody go? Well, as I found out later, that most guys in the American Hockey League have already got their U-Hauls all packed up, ready to go back home. They didn't really want to go back to Hershey for Game 5.
That's funny.
So, it was maybe it was more than 3, but to me, it was a memory that I remembered. So there couldn't have been that many on the ice, But,
right.
Tell me a little bit about the American League.
The one guy I always remember, shoot the puck, Larry Sacher. He had 27 goals on defense that year, half a year.
Boom, boom. We called him boom, boom. He had a hard slap shot, but I always joked with him that the safest place would be in front of the net because.
Yeah, he could.
But no, Larry, myself, and a guy by the name of Jerry Teeple, God rest his soul. He passed away at a young age. we kind of were that year. The three of us hung out together, so we were good friends. And I've only run into him once since. I was at the All-Star game. I think it was in Colorado in like '99 or something. And the guy comes out to the lobby to get me. He goes, "A friend of yours is in the bar." So I walked in. Who's in there but Larry Sacher? I hadn't seen him since '73. I don't think, maybe '74 when he was up with the Rangers. But
right.
We kind of lost track of each other. So it's great to see him, and I haven't seen him since. But
right.
He was doing good.
Well, speaking of that next year with the Rangers, it's your first full year with the team. Although you're injured, you have a tremendous season. It's also interesting to note.
Started off tremendous. It didn't end tremendous.
Yeah, it started out quite productive for you, and gave a lot of promise to the future. One of the players that also joined the Rangers that year was Derek Sanderson, coincidentally,
right,
from the Boston Bruins. I know you have a lot of respect for Derek. At that time, you know, he in his book, he would freely admit he was not at his best. He was going through a lot of struggles. Did you, I guess my question is, were you aware of how deep his problems were back then personally? Because he was still productive on the ice, still a great teammate and fun to be around. Were you aware of what he was going through on a personal level?
No, I really wasn't. And you know, he never said anything. The thing is that he had just come out of the WHA as the highest paid athlete in sports. I mean, he seemed to be on top of the world. He had a girlfriend at the time who was a Ford agency model by the name of Jill, as I remember, beautiful girl. And he seemed to be doing fine. He had a good year in New York that year, and then when they traded him to St. Louis, I believe he had the best point production year of his career.
You're right.
Year. So
you're right. He's playing with Guy LaRose's dad, Claude LaRose, and Chuck Lefley.
Yeah, and Chuck scored 50 that year, I think, and they never signed him. But anyways, that's another story. But that was the '70s. It was a lot of fun. We used to. The Jets and the Giants would play in the afternoon, Sunday afternoon. We play Sunday night at Madison Square. We'd all go to a bar on First Avenue called the Tittle Tattle, and you know, they're open till 4 a.m. So what's a 20-year-old kid to do? But that was the lifestyle then. We all lived, except for Derek and Rod Gilbert, who lived in Manhattan. The rest of us lived in Long Beach, Long Island, and that's where the practice rink was, because you could never practice at Madison Square. And so we'd have to get back out there Monday morning in time for practice very often.
Right.
But it was, it was a magical time. I mean, I still get goosebumps going into Madison Square Gardens. I love my time with the Rangers. The second year wasn't as good. It was a transition year. They fired Emile Francis. They traded obviously Derek and Eddie Giacomin, and then the big trade with Espo. So it was a year of transition, and the only year I didn't make the playoffs in my career.
Wow.
And and I was a kid just maybe having a little too much fun in New York, and they decided, if you're on a winning team, some things can be overlooked, but when you're on a losing team, I was the odd man out, and really thank goodness for it that I ended up in Boston. I could have ended up anywhere, and I got a break.
Recently, talking with Brad Park about that trade, the thing about it is that Kenny Hodge obviously had a fantastic career, but at that point he's nearing the end and you're at the beginning, and that was the biggest thing that stood out to me, even as a fan, was at that time there's about a 10-year age difference there, and Kenny had kind of fallen out of favor somewhat with Don Cherry. He was back in those days when you're 33, it was more like today's 38. It was kind of like you were getting a little bit to the end there, where again you were at the beginning stages of your career. So the trade surprised a lot of people. Did it surprise you? Did you have any indication that was going to happen?
Well, nobody wants to be traded, and I always had the dream, especially like going to camp the first year, and they were coming off of Stanley Cup Finals. I thought, hey, this is going to be great. Ticker tape parade down Fifth Avenue, and I'm going to be part of this organization that's going somewhere. but it wasn't to be for the organization or for me. And no, admittedly, I wasn't the most disciplined person off the ice, but I really didn't have a lot of mentorship or leadership because they were getting rid of a lot of their leaders on the team also.
Right.
But coming to Boston at that time, I think I never blamed anybody. I could see why they would want to possibly get rid of me because they thought either I was a bad influence on other guys or I was soon gonna be a wreck myself and out of the league. I never looked at myself that way, but I guess they did, and who knows what stories they heard. But when I got to Boston, it was I really didn't change a lot of things. I ended up getting an apartment downtown, but we had a good team, we had a better team, we had a winning team, and we had a great coach. And just the combination of veterans and young guys made hockey fun again. And I'll tell you, that year of '75 was not fun. And I just kind of lit a new life in me, and it just started from there, and it continued going forward for me for the next 12 years. So I got very lucky.
No, absolutely. It was certainly a special time and a special team. But before, I wanted to step back into the 1975 season real quick. And you're on the other side of what I consider to be one of the obviously top biggest trades ever. That was just a blockbuster trade. Phil Esposito coming to New York. What was it like being on the other side of that thing? It had to be an incredible shock with the Rangers relinquishing both Brad Park and Jean Rattel.
Well, it was bittersweet. I remember the day it happened. We were in California playing the Golden Seals, and I went down for breakfast, and I walk in, and Rod Gilbert's got tears in his eyes. I'm like, Rod, what's wrong? He said, they traded Reddy. I mean, he just could not believe it. They grew up playing junior hockey. I think even before that, they grew up playing together. They'd been on the Rangers together. They'd always been together. And he could not believe that they traded. And then to the Boston Bruins, the arch enemy.
Right. Oh, it was unbelievable.
All four of those guys thought their careers were over. But on the good side of it for me, I got a chance to play on the same line as Phil Esposito for a while. So,
right.
I would never have had a chance to do that. And then getting Phil in Boston and knowing what I know now afterwards by reading his book or whatever, that he wanted one of his old wingers. It wasn't like he wanted to get rid of me, but he wanted one of his old wingers from what I read.
Right.
And unbeknownst to me, they had soured on Kenny for some reason. And so they made the trade. But it wasn't like they wanted me out. The players didn't like me or anything like that. They were just cleaning house and trying to retool their team in New York. But I got a chance to play with my original teammates, Jean Rattel and Brad Park again, and I got a chance to play with Phil in New York, and Rod Gilbert, who was a great friend at that time too. What a classy guy he was. Even to this day, every time I see him,
Oh, absolutely.
So I love my time in New York, honestly.
Did you get to Boston? Now, as we're talking about in New York and the style of play there, your job was to take care of the offensive end of the ice and to score. The Cat didn't really he wasn't really a system type of guy back then. Of course, you come to Boston and Don Cherry has a much different approach and a successful approach. You're a young guy. You've been taught what you've been taught to that point, and the interesting dynamic. And again, when I had talked to Brad Park recently, just saying he just felt like Don Cherry didn't quite know what to make of you or do with you at the beginning, and but then of course everything just kind of clicks perfectly. But I'm assuming that you were at the receiving end of some rather high volume critiques from Don Cherry.
I have a couple of memories that stand out pretty well. One of them, as Don likes to tell also, because the very first day we go on the ice, we're skating around with Peter McNabb and Wayne Cash and Bobby Schmutz, I think. And Don just comes over and takes his glove off, sticks his hand out, and he says, "Hey, Ricky boy." Oh, he called me Ricky boy. he says, "Hey, you're looking a little bigger. You've been working out." And I just looked at him, in my sarcastic way, but didn't mean to be disrespectful at all. I just said, "No, Don, I just had a good summer." Because I did. I spent that summer in Long Island, in Long Beach, Long Island, which is like Hampton Beach where I live now. So
Right.
I did have a good summer. And okay, maybe I was a couple pounds overweight. But in those days, you went to camp to get into shape. You did 2-a-days for 3 weeks. I mean, a couple pounds is going to come off pretty fast. But Smotch was laughing so hard he fell down on the ice. And I don't know if I endeared myself to the rest of the guys, or certainly not to Don that day. But as we got to know each other, he didn't take it personal. And then he played me after camp, the opening game. He put me on a line with Jean Rattel and Johnny Busick, as I remember, and I ended up scoring a hat trick. I mean, how can you not? So I thought, wow, great start. Here we go. And then he benched me, basically. I wouldn't call it benching. He platooned me. I didn't play regular. I played the right side and the left side, which really paid off in the long run. It's the only reason I made the Canada Cup team in '81. And getting 3 in the first game, I ended up with 20 on the whole year. So
Right.
you can imagine my lack of ice time from then on. But he was trying to drill into my head about there's 2 ends of the ice here, and if you don't take care of your responsibilities in this end, we're not going to let you skate into the other end. And then one game, I'll never forget it, in Buffalo, they had a 2-on-1. My memory of it, I must have been back checking, making it a 2-on-2. And it was Bill Height and Danny Gare. And Danny Gare's a 50-goal scorer, and Bill Height scores 2 goals a year. So he's always, pressing on me, cover your defense. So but I figured Bill Height, the dangerous guy here is Danny Gare. So I went to get him. And don't you know, Bill Height scores like his 2nd goal of the year. And I come over to the bench, and he's just yelling and screaming at me. And I think I sat for the rest of the game that game. But I know I was in the right. I took the right guy. But the odds weren't with me that night.
You look at Bill.
Outside of that, I got next in the playoffs that year. The first year, we went to play Philly in the semis, and the first 2 games were in the Spectrum, because they must finish higher in the standings than we did. And again, I wasn't playing all that regular during the game, and I went into overtime. And he comes to me in the dressing room in overtime, and he leans down almost like a whisper, and he goes, "You're going to get the winner," right? So I look up at him in my normal sarcastic way. I look at him, I said, "So I must be playing, right?" And he just looks at me, and he walks away. And I ended up getting the winner against Bernie Perron, one of those hard shots that just made it over the line, and that's about it, off his blocker. And Terry ended up scoring in double overtime the next night. We knocked the Flyers out 4 straight, and then Montreal knocked us out 4 straight.
Right.
In the final. But that was my first experience from going the year before, not making the playoffs, getting traded to the Stanley Cup Finals the next year. It was just a magical year. It really was.
Yeah, it was a team that, when I look back at your career, throughout your entire career, only 4 teams ended up winning the Stanley Cup: Philadelphia, Montreal, Islanders, and Edmonton. It was not easy to do, but the Bruins team was right there knocking on the door. And you have to, you could look back and say maybe one player short, trading deadline maybe, but there's other factors that come into play. I mean, you lose players to injury and things happen here and there, but the bottom line is...
There was no free agency in those days, so it was pretty hard to add a guy at the trade deadline unless you gave up something for him. So I understand that with Harry, but it always seemed that if we did trade a guy, we got somebody of equal value. It didn't seem like we ever added to our team, when it really wasn't that hard to figure out what you needed to do, because you had Montreal in the late 70s, Islanders in the early 80s, and Edmonton in the late 80s, and you knew we need a little more help here. We're having trouble beating these guys. We're close, but who could we get possibly that would help us? And my only memory of that is when we started the season, and I don't know whether it was 82 or 84. I can't remember the year. Probably 84. 06-1, and Harry spent a first-round draft pick to get Charlie Simmer.
That's right.
We were so bad. We were so bad. And, Charlie was a great addition, but it was only because we sucked so bad. It wasn't like, oh, we get this guy at the trade deadline. The only other time I remember getting guys that helped us was in '88, my last year, when Janney and Joyce came to the team from the Olympics, and gave us another scoring line, and we went all the way to the finals. So you can see the effect. And then you look at the Red Sox this year. You can see the effect if you get the right guys at the right time. It can really
certainly.
propel you
the best.
into a championship.
Sure, the best example of that in hockey in that era was the Islanders in 1980.
Blood scoring.
Right.
Blood scoring.
So
if they didn't trade for Butchie as a second line center, they never would have won the cup all those years.
So you go through the 70s, the team is as close knit as you could possibly be. I feel like when I see you guys together, whether it be John Wensink or Stan Jonathan, you had to get together last year to celebrate the 11 20-goal scorers on the team. I recently was with Peter McNabb, as you know, to talk with him a little bit, and it seems like to this day, that group, you've played with a lot of different teams, you have great relationships with everybody along the way, but that group, that 77, 78 group, seems to be particularly close. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, really, that whole group right through those 3 years, 70, 76, 77, through the Too Many Men on the Ice, pretty much the same team. Bobby Miller coming to the team, but we had pretty much the same team, and we were close. Everybody genuinely liked each other and backed each other up on the ice, and went out together for beers off the ice and on the road, and it was just, and then Don kind of made us feel special because we were the biggest draw on the road in the league, and mainly because of his mouth, and he'd go into towns the night before, and there'd be a big article in the paper the next day, and people would come out to watch the Boston Bruins. I mean, he made us maybe a little bigger than we were, but then he would call us the lunch pail kids, like we were like blue collar working class guys. But we had a lot of talent on that team, a lot of talent.
Sure did.
Peter and I had breakfast one day, and that's how this whole 11-20 goal scorer thing started. We were saying that, the sad thing is when you finish second, you never have a reunion.
Right.
You never have a team reunion. We finished second a lot. But so then when I saw my plaque in my office here, I realized it's 40 years ago we did that, held that record for 40 years. Then I thought, hey, let's have a reunion, at least with those guys back. And Cam agreed, and it happened. It was a great night last year.
That, of course, is one record that you can safely say will never be broken. It takes
in today's era, it's pretty hard to do it. And I wasn't even aware there were like 3 other teams that had 10 scorers. I didn't know that. So
right.
But just the way it was done too, with Bobby Miller scoring in the empty net.
Oh, that was incredible. Yeah, I put that up online on the Bruins Alumni Facebook page because I had forgotten how unlikely and how obscenely rare of that opportunity was. Seconds left in the game. Roger Nielsen, who's a smart guy, pulling his goalie in the other end, and having the opportunity with just seconds left. It was just incredible.
They must have been down by 2 goals or something. I can't remember. But to not put the goalie back in on a face-off in your own end,
right.
There had to be a reason in his mind. But
absolutely.
Thank goodness he did,
No question. Now, when the team's transitioning out of the 70s, you do get an infusion of a guy whose number is going to be in the rafters with you, and that is Ray Bourque. Tell me a little bit of, right off the bat, he is a bona fide star of the National Hockey League. Tell me a little bit about your first impressions of young Raymond Bourque.
I have a clear memory of him and Brad McCrimmon coming up. Just 2 young kids full of energy, and great hockey players, both of them. And Ray was a little different style, a little more offensive in those days, skate the puck up the ice. Brad was more of a stay at home, get in your face type of defenseman. I thought they complemented each other well. and they would eat everything in sight. It was funny, you know. We'd have sandwiches on the bus or something, and it'd be like, "Are you going to eat that? Are you going to finish that?" They were like young pups, like animals, just so full of life, and just loved to be a Boston Bruin and fit right into the team right away. And obviously, Ray became a leader and went on to have that great career. But you know, in the beginning, I think it was important he had Brad Park there to kind of show him the ropes a little bit of a veteran. Bobby was gone, and Brad was his kind of mentor, I think. And then, you know, one of my biggest honors was being named co-captain with him in '85. And then when I retired, he went on to stay a captain for another 12 years. So he was a great player, great guy. He still plays on our alumni team. They were just up in northern Quebec. I didn't make the trip myself, but they went up there, and Ray was there. So he's still playing and still loving the game, and the spark in his eye is still there from the first time he came to the Bruins.
Absolutely, as it is with all you guys on the ice, and the competitive edge is still there. You can still see it. But going back, and one of my favorite Bruin teams, one of the most underrated Bruin teams of all time, you're going through the 80s, and you're playing a lot, you're scoring a lot, three-time All-Star. One of my favorite teams of all time is a team that faced a lot of adversity, which was the 82-83 Bruins team. You lose Norm Levier early in the season, tragically. Terry O'Reilly's hurt for most of that year, doesn't play in the playoffs. But you get Pete Peters. You and Barry Peterson now, about your third year together, are really clicking. You add Mike Kruzhelnicki, and you have the best record during the regular season. I think Jerry Cheevers
at the All-Star game.
Right, and Jerry Cheevers, I thought, was like a great coach for you too back then. He basically, it seemed like every time you watched the game that you were on the ice constantly back then.
Well, and you know, I credit Don Cherry for that, because you know, Jerry in the 80s would never have had the confidence to put me in all those situations if I hadn't learned from Don in the 70s. So, you know, step by step, at 78, 79, 80, Don's gone, and then Jerry comes in, and I was kind of his go-to guy. And luckily for me, you know, power play and then penalty killing. I don't think I killed a penalty under Don. You know, Donnie Marcotte and Shepard and all these. I wasn't going to kill a penalty. Are you kidding me? But I got a chance under Cheesy, and ended up now having the most shorthanded goals in Bruins history. So, you know, I never saw that coming, and I didn't even start to the 80s. You know? Yeah,
that's amazing. So, I didn't really, you know, I didn't realize that. I talk about that a lot, and I think that in addition to the stats that you see on paper is the fact that you became a very good offensive player who was a very reliable defensive player, very reliable penalty killer. That's rare among top scorers. The other thing you alluded to a little bit earlier is you played a lot of left wing as well. I mean, you could have easily been classified in various seasons that you played as a left wing, which is important because there was another right wing in the league at the time called Mike Bossy. And before that, it was Guy Lafleur.
And at the same time in the early 80s, trust me, it wasn't great to be a right winger trying to make an all-star team in the early 80s. But I had played some left wing, and I could have been, but they always put me down as a right winger, and I think you're right. It did hurt my chances at times, you know, when it comes to all-star teams or whatever. And then really back as late as 86, 87, I played left wing on the same line with Cam his first full year, and Thomas Gradine, who they brought over from Vancouver also, and we both scored 30-something goals that year. So it was a pretty good year. But that was my last full year, you know, at least my last time I ever saw a power play. The next year they dropped me down to the third line. So, and I know what that means, because they cut your ice time down, your numbers go down, and then you see the door. And so that's what happened. Yeah.
I want to ask you about Terry O'Reilly for a moment. You were teammates with him, of course. He was your coach. More importantly, now he continues to be a close friend of yours. And I want to talk a little bit about Terry O'Reilly as you know him uniquely, as a person. and I guess as a player when you first met him, and then as a person today.
Well, Terry, I've never met another NHL player like Terry. I mean, there's guys that'll take the physical role on, and I'm not saying he liked it, but he took the role on like it was his job, and primarily his job. It wasn't whether any other guys are going to do it or he's just one of a group. It was he would be the first one that if somebody was getting abused out there, or the other team was trying to take liberties with certain people, including myself, having those guys on the team when somebody else comes in the Boston Garden, or even when you go back on the road, most of the time the other team had to worry about those guys because if they're tough guys. Most of the other teams couldn't match up to Boston when it can't come to toughness. So, and Terry was the leader, and I think some of the other guys knew that, and they played that strong-willed because Terry was so strong-willed, and he did that right through his whole career, even when he was so injured and banged up. I remember him telling me when Al Secord came to the team, he thought, "Oh, finally," he said, "I got a nice young guy here, going to take a little of the weight off of Terry from having to, answer the bell maybe every night." Right. And then they trade Al. And right. It was like, so all, the weight of a lot of the physical stuff went back on him, but he never complained. He just took it in stride and did, what he saw as his job. And besides that, he scored over 300 goals. And then, when he became a coach, it was the same mentality. He didn't expect everybody to play like him, but he expected that the team, everybody back each other up and make sure nobody takes any liberties. And then we had, Jay Miller, Lyndon Byers, and a few of those guys on the team. So again, the Bruins were tough to play against. That's the type of team that he loved to coach, I'm sure. But a good team, a good team.
Yeah, he was very successful as a coach, and he was very successful. People forget because time goes on and you don't really maybe know the history of it. Terry O'Reilly had a 90-point season in the NHL. He was a terrific playmaker. Along with everything, he's very self-deprecating. He'll tell you he was
leading scorer, I believe, the first year I was here, 76-77.
Right.
I think he led in penalty minutes and points.
He could really play, and he developed himself through blood, sweat, and tears. And of course, he was a fearsome fighter. But with the puck in his skates, he actually had a good backhander. He did a lot of little things that were very, very impressive. And I
didn't realize this till he told me he was a goalie till he was 12 years old.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Didn't know that.
That's what he told me. In Oshawa, he played for the Generals, and he's from Oshawa, and he played goalie till he was 12. So I think that explained a little why people said he wasn't the best skater, because he probably didn't even start skating out till he was a teenager. And as you know, you have to learn at an early age. It takes a long time to get to the NHL level. But he worked on it every day, first on, last off the ice. He not only let on the ice, he let at practice too. So there wasn't a lot of slacking off that was allowed by teammates.
It's just good to see that camaraderie still exists today, stronger than ever, really.
Yeah. Well, we're really more social friends now than we were back then, and we don't live too far from each other, so we like to get together. And every once in a while, Johnny Wensick will come into town, Peter McNabb, and ever since the reunion last year, it seems that more guys seem to be coming in. Stan comes in once in a while. Dwight Foster's coming in for my thing. So, but Terry and I have become social friends, and our wives. And the thing with him is that he really hasn't changed that much. He's a little more relaxed now, I find, as we all are because we're older. But he still has that competitive side to him. When he gets on the ice, it's like, that puck's his. I want that puck.
Right.
and like they joked about, at the face-off, when you're playing right wing, it's only it's only a place to line up on the face-off because you really don't have to stay on that side. And in our alumni games, he plays defense, but it's just a place to line up on the face-off, trust me.
Right, absolutely.
If that puck is going up the ice, so is he. It's funny to watch. He still has that sparkle in his eye to play the game. And, you know, even times when he's told me he's not feeling that good, or he's out there and he just won't quit. He'll just keep going at it. And he just got back from the trip to northern Quebec for a couple of days, way up there. So he still enjoys it, and, you know, as do I. And hopefully we can still do it for a couple more years.
And it's also very nice to see the fact that the close relationships, that it's such a great vibe when you're around, whether it be the players or the people around, like Battleship Bob Cormier or John,
right.
Karen Wadowski, everybody. It's a really a family atmosphere.
Yeah, it is, and you know the games are fun. We don't play to lose, but we also don't play to blow other teams out. It's the prime purpose here is to raise money for their charity and for them to have fun and their families and the audience. But I got to tell you, I said I remember not that long ago we used to have some easy games. None of the games seem easy anymore. either we're all getting older or they're getting younger, but they seem a little more competitive than they used to be. But that's okay. I mean, because we like to be able to skate and pass and play the game and have some fun without the hooking and holding. But what else is special is that you get a chance to play with other Bruin alumni that are in different eras. You know, guys as young as the late 30s, early 40s that have just retired, and you never get a chance to play on the same team with them or with the Bruins sweater on, for sure. And I really enjoy that all up and down the lineup, whether it's Danny Lacouture or Andrew Alberts, you know, the really young guys, Pat Leahy, Mike Motto. And so it's good to see that the Bruins alumni have these good young legs coming up, and hopefully they'll carry on the tradition after Terry and I decide to pack it in.
Absolutely. Hopefully no time soon. So in your post-retirement, of course, you know, one thing that I have to mention, that we don't have time to go into all of it because it's a story in and of itself, but has to be an incredible source of pride that you are a gold medal winner with the U.S. national sled hockey team from 2002. What are those things in your career maybe some of the fans aren't really aware of? And again, that's a story in and of itself, and potentially a movie in and of itself.
Well, it's such a good story, we're making a movie out of it. We're trying to make a movie out of it. We just finished the script, first script on the story. So hopefully they'll see it in a theater not too far from today, but that's what we're working at. Right. Yeah, it was a story that you know, through the 90s I just coached my kids and in hockey, and you know, it was getting farther and farther away in the rearview mirror. And I got a phone call in early 2001 from a friend of mine that was a sled hockey player, unbeknownst to me, and the captain of the U.S. national ski team, disabled ski team. And he asked me if I would be interested in coaching the U.S. national sled hockey team because they're the host team in Salt Lake City in 2002, and their coach had quit in the World Championship, so they didn't have a coach. And they'd only ever won one game in their history, but would you be interested?
Right.
And I'm like, sled hockey? And I'm thinking, what's that? Mm-hmm. I'd heard of it, but, you know. And then he asked, he said, you know what sled hockey? I said, oh, yeah, I know. But I had no idea. I just heard hockey, and I heard Paralympics. And I really wasn't familiar that much with Paralympics, but it's got to be close to the Olympics, I figured. So I basically made my decision in half an hour when Rich Glopper, the manager, called me back and asked me the same questions, and I lied to him, too. And but then I got into this world of sled hockey, which I call it the bizarro world, and the story will come out in the movie. The movie's fictional, based on a true story, but most of the storylines will be the same, and I won't go into it here. But the great part of it was meeting these guys, meeting the sled players, becoming friends with them, learning what their lives were about, and you know, they all had something to overcome on an individual basis before they even played the game. And then they had to overcome, only ever winning one game in their history and being seeded last in their home Paralympics in Salt Lake City, and then going on to win every game and the gold medal in the gold medal game in front of the largest crowd to ever see a sled game to this day, over 8,000 people, and to do it in a shootout that went down to the last shooter. I've never been involved in anything in hockey that was that exciting. And as a player, you're only in charge of yourself, but as a coach, you don't want to screw it up for the rest of the guys. Well, and I didn't have a big history in coaching at that level, for sure. There was so much on the line. I just didn't want to screw it up, but it all worked out. And since then, they've won a bronze and 3 more gold medals, and they're the top team in the world. So we're just happy that we helped the program really get off the ground. And now they're the best. They beat Canada in overtime in Korea this year in 2018. It's going to be great. 3 of the players are coming in for my night. 2 of them live in Massachusetts, Joe Howard and Kip St. Germain, and Manny Guerra, the goalie's coming in from Minnesota. So they're going to be on the ice with me. So I'm going to tell a little story when I'm on the ice.
Perfect. We began this podcast prior to the interview talking a little bit about Nifty's audiobook library and that entire program, which is designed to give fans a voice, rather than just commenting on social media or something you can kind of get buried in, but basically relating their stories of not only yourself, but the Bruins of that era. Talk a little bit how you got involved in that and just a little bit about the program as well.
Well, it's a unique idea. A friend of mine, Al Brandano, had it several years ago now, and he's been running, called the Voice Library. And it makes complete sense to me. It was done, I think, primarily for the military, so that they would have the voices of their loved ones, on tape. I know myself, I might have a couple movies with my dad in it, but I don't have my dad's voice on tape that I can go to on my phone anytime. I have a couple of saved messages from my mother, who they're both gone, for Happy Father's Day and this thing, but I got none of my dad's. So what this was, Al had the idea that it would be nice if people could just tell a story, not necessarily a nifty story, although if you have one that you remember going to a game of the 70s or 80s, I mean that would be great, or just of that era of the Bruins and some of your favorite memories going to the games with your dad, like I did in Toronto with my dad. Just some good-hearted memories of the days gone by of the old Bruins and old-time hockey kind of. And I think it's great, and it doesn't take very long. And then I'd have that library to listen to for the rest of my life, and my kids and anybody else can listen to it too. After the new year, I believe they'll be able to tune into a lot of the stories. So I hope some people take advantage of that and have a story to tell.
I'm sure they will. There's a lot of fans, a lot of stories. You can see it when we post on Facebook on the Bruins Alumni page. People just love to share those stories. This is a little bit easier, though, and you can be a little more expressive. And as you said, there's nothing that replaces actually having the voice. But as I said, Nifty...
If they want to go on and get it for themselves, they can, for their own family and stories amongst their own family. So it's a great thing that you can pass on from generation to generation. So I hope a lot of people check it out.
So finally, Nifty, we just wanted to say, obviously, as I said, I decided to dub this 10 seconds into our conversation, Nifty November. It will.
I like the name.
It'll be a little bit crazy, but anyway, we wanted to just say congratulations. We're very, very proud of you. It's something that's well deserved, not only for what you accomplished as a player. But certainly, and I've seen, firsthand, and so have thousands of others, the efforts on behalf of not only growing the game of hockey, but helping people in need throughout not just New England, but throughout North America. And well-deserved. We're very, very happy for you. It's going to be a special night for everybody, especially for you and your family. And again, congratulations, well-deserved.
Well, thank you, Mark. And honestly, I think, and I've said this before, I feel like I say it too much, but I think it's the greatest honor an athlete can ever receive. And I am so honored to be thought of. I can't say I didn't think about it when nobody has worn the jersey the last 5 or 6 years, but over the last 30 years, I didn't think it was going to happen. So Cam took me totally by surprise, and I thank him for it.
Well deserved. Again, we appreciate you going
Thanks,
OT with us, Nifty. We'll see you very soon, of course. But in the meantime, thanks, and we'll look forward to seeing you soon.
All right. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, man. Take care.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks for listening to the Pro Hockey Alumni Podcast. Be sure to visit us at prohockeyalumni.org.